Welcome to Rupp Fallsgraff's Empire State Entrepreneurs and New York Business Law podcast, a really fun and informative forum for us to showcase our clients, strategic partners, and community leaders to talk about relevant issues for entrepreneurs and business owners throughout New York. My name is David Fallsgraff, and I'm blessed to be the managing partner at a local Buffalo law firm known as Rupp Fallsgraff. We're in our 25th year of business and are so excited about the energy and momentum in our community right now. And I'm really enjoying doing this podcast and have a very, very special guest today. And before I get to Mr. Higgins, I wanted to take a quick minute to thank Mike and Eric and all of our friends at Incept for allowing us to host this podcast in this really neat, one-of-a-kind studio right in downtown Buffalo. My firm has been using Incept on a ton of projects, and they're really doing a great job for us. So with that, I'm excited to welcome my good friend and community leader, Brian Higgins, into the studio. As many of you know, Brian is the president and CEO of Shea's Performing Arts Center. It's a real privilege to have you here with me today, Brian.
David, happy to be with you. Thank you very much.
And I want to talk a lot about Shea's and some of the great work you're doing there, Brian. But before getting there, I think your journey is unique amongst the guests that I've had over the last year. And I'm not even sure I know what originally led you to into politics. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your upbringing, your educational background, what first led you into politics, and sort of the early stages of your congressional career. And from there, we can pivot into Shea's and shows and energy downtown and all that. But tell me a little bit about sort of your formative years and the early stages of your upbringing and your educational background.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dave. I grew up in South Buffalo, second youngest of five. My dad was a union bricklayer, and my mother was a school teacher. She taught grammar school at Our Lady of Perpetual Help on O'Connell Street in the First Ward of Buffalo. And my dad also went into politics. He was a member of the Buffalo City Council from 1969 to 1978. I went to Buffalo State College for my undergraduate and graduate degrees, and I received a fellowship to study at Harvard University, where I received a master's degree in administration and policy in 1996. Bob Wilmers, interesting story, former president of M&T Bank, I had applied to the graduate program at Harvard in deferred because I was serving on the Buffalo City Council. I, too, was elected. That was my first elected office. I was about 25 years old, and I deferred because I just couldn't leave. So Bob Wilmers was on the visiting committee at Harvard, and he found out, I think he got like a printout at that time of everybody that had applied and got in or whatever. So he called me one day. He said, Brian, you were accepted and you deferred. Why did you defer? I said, well, Mr. Wilmers, right now I just can't afford it. The tuition at that time was about $80,000 a year for a 2-year graduate program. So he said, well, what if I were able to help you? I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, give me a couple of days. So he calls back a couple of days later and he says, I just endowed a graduate fellowship at Harvard, and you can be the first recipient if you want, which would pay all my tuition and fees.
Incredible story. I never heard that story.
Yeah, so I went, and it was the greatest educational experience I've ever had in my life. It was incredible. I was accepted from a class from 4,000 applicants. They accepted 200 students from 78 different countries. So it was a great gift that Bob Wilmers gave to me. He said, you have one obligation, which made sense later on. He said, you have to come back to Buffalo. So I said, I can do that. Interestingly enough, because of the school, they have heavy recruitment. So I was recruited by McKinsey & Company and Microsoft, closest job to Buffalo and Western New York was Northern California. But I made an obligation to come back. So I came back. I ran for the state assembly, served there 6 years, was planning on running for lieutenant governor of New York. Jack Quinn was the member of Congress at the time. Jack was thought to be there for a long time. It was announced, quite a surprise, that he was leaving Congress. So I quickly shifted focus, and I ran for election to the United States Congress in 2004. I won by 3,800 votes, less than 1%. That would be a landslide today.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah, and I served in Congress for the next 19 years, and I left last February. I was first recruited, invited to participate as a candidate in the selection committee for Buffalo State, now University, the presidency. So I did so kind of quietly. I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave Congress, and for a number of reasons, I withdrew. I thought quietly, but word kind of got out, and I was lucky. I had a lot of options, and one was the Shea's Performing Arts Center, which the more I got into it, the better the fit was. So that's where I am now.
That's what a story, what a journey, Brian. And I'm curious. You had the good fortune of getting out of Buffalo for those years at Harvard and Boston, and I'm wondering, other than the commitment to Mr. Wilmers, which I respect a great deal, to come back pursuant to his wish, did you have opportunities, or did you have any thoughts about staying outside of Buffalo until your journey took you back here to Buffalo, or were you always sort of a proud Buffalo born and bred? I'm going to make a difference in my hometown. And I'm curious if you were at all conflicted or torn coming out of Harvard, having these opportunities to go work with the Microsofts and the McKinseys of the world. Was it an easy decision for you, or a hard decision to come back here?
It was. I felt fortunate to have had the opportunity to live in Boston. I mean, Boston area is a great place. I'm a runner. I used to run the Charles River. Going into Boston's one of the great American cities, without question. Living in Cambridge, I lived in a graduate dorm off of Harvard Square at the corner of Ash and Brattle Streets. The whole experience was great. And I felt fortunate to have lived there during that period of time. But, Buffalo's always been my home. I've always had a vision and an energy to try to change it. When I was elected to the United States Congress, I didn't go to Congress to change the world. I went to change Buffalo. And I was fortunate. I had mentioned previously that I taught history and economics at Buffalo State College for 7 years. And what we would do is chronicle the rise and decline of Buffalo's economy dating back to the 1901 Pan American Exposition. And Buffalo was the 8th largest economy in the nation because of one thing: hydroelectricity. And it was a lake that fed a river that was diverted. It produced the cleanest, cheapest electricity in the United States. So the Pan American Exposition was held in 1901 to showcase how electricity could change the world. We electrified our streetlights. And, you keep in mind, we have all this beautiful architecture in Buffalo, the Guarantee Building, designed by Louis Sullivan, St. Paul's Cathedral, designed by Richard Upjohn, the Ellicott Square Building, designed by Daniel Burnham, Frank Lloyd Wright. And what I often say about, those world-renowned architects, none of them were from Buffalo. They came to Buffalo because we were a city given the wealth and confidence that said to these creative people, you can get your vision turned into something real, something tangible here in Buffalo and Western New York. Frederick Law Olmsted came to Buffalo in 1868, and he said to the city that was, wealthy and vibrant, don't build a park, build a park system. And he built the greatest park system in the world right here in Buffalo. So, that's the lessons early on. And then as we evolved into the middle of the 20th century, the world economy began to change. Technology began to replace labor-intensive manufacturing. And we went through a rough patch. But most recently, pre-pandemic, Buffalo was the talk of the nation. The Economist magazine, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Fortune magazine, even, People magazine. They talked in 2017 what the greatest 100 things are about America. Buffalo was number 17, just beneath the Jonas Brothers. So, it's just, but these were real, these are, Zillow said last year that Buffalo was the hottest real estate market in America. So we've diversified our economy, the work of M&T Bank under its new leadership with Renee Jones, the emphasis on tech jobs and entrepreneurs and all those things have created a place that people once had to leave are now coming back to. And, they were in the Chicagos and the Bostons and the New Yorks, but in the West Coast, but they're coming back to Buffalo. So it's important that, it's good. It's good to have momentum, but momentum doesn't mean anything unless it's sustained. And I think that's where the investment in downtown Buffalo and that Main Street corridor led by Seneca One and companies like, 43 North and certainly, M&T Bank with Renee Jones. M&T's made a major commitment in investing, in Buffalo and its future. And I'm a walking example of that.
You've just had a career defined by service and admirable indeed, Brian. And I'm wondering if those values, that commitment to others, certainly your father being involved in politics, and before you joined Congress, did you have a sense that the early stages of your career were going to be involved in politics, or did you think, you coming out with this great degree, this graduate degree, coming back to your hometown, looking to make a difference? I am certain that there could have been, a dozen employers that would have hired you in a minute to work on policy or to work on, any number of different things. Instead, you choose to serve, and I'm wondering, and maybe our listeners would benefit to get a sense of what your mindset was back in the early 2000s, or this opportunity in Congress presents itself. Did you know that at that time that you would be sort of 19 years later, and was that your goal originally, or did it just sort of evolve?
It was whatever it took for me to make, an existential, a standout contribution to the new Buffalo. And what I learned when I taught the history of Buffalo and Western New York is how significant. See, the Niagara Power Project, the New York Power Authority owns 17 power generating plants in New York State. Most of them are either lose money or they're marginally profitable. The cash cow is the Niagara Power Project. And it's our lake that feeds a river that produces the cheapest, cleanest electricity. The year that I was elected to Congress, the 50-year license that the New York Power Authority had to own and operate the Niagara Power Project was expiring. They had to apply for a new 50-year license to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That was my leverage. So I filed a bill seeking a $1 billion settlement. I wish I were a trial lawyer. I'd get a third of that. And we ended up settling. We received a $300 million settlement that had to be used for waterfront development in Buffalo. And I used a provision in the Federal Power Act, provision Section 9, that said the applicant for a new license or a license renewal had to provide the host community with a mitigation settlement. I argued that cheap hydroelectricity led to the rise of manufacturing industrial businesses along the waterfront. Now they're gone, and we have to mitigate. We have to clean up the land and the water, and we got a $300 million settlement. And it was one of those issues where, as you know, people talked about waterfront development for 75 years without one tangible improvement. And we just got it going. We have a new state park on the Outer Harbor waterfront. We have a brand new parkway. Canal Side is developing. All those things were financed through that $300 million settlement. And I'll never forget it. I went to Washington. This fight went on for about a year, and I had to step on some toes, but I only had a year to do it. If we didn't do it that year, we would have lost the opportunity for another 50 years. But one day I was in the Capitol on a Tuesday, and I was laughed at. by some of my colleagues and the Power Authority. A meeting was held in the United States Capitol to put an end to my effort to continue to fight for Buffalo. And, long story short, by Friday, I had a $300 million promissory note in my pocket, getting on the plane, going back to Buffalo.
Incredible.
That was a good goddamn day for the neighborhood.
Incredible. And the results, I think, can be seen, each and every day as we see that waterfront come to life. And I'm sure you have plenty of examples of other impact that you're particularly proud of during those 19 years of service in the United States Congress. Can you give our listeners, a couple other historical moments, the waterfront development, the renegotiation of the NYPA deal, all incredible feathers in your cap, Brian, but any others that maybe aren't as known commonly, things that had an impact on Western New York that you're particularly proud of?
Sure, Dave. I was a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the most prestigious committee in the House. 8 presidents, 8 vice presidents, 23 speakers of the House, and 4 members of the United States Supreme Court served as members of Congress on the House Ways and Means Committee. It's the tax writing committee. It's as exciting as it sounds, but it's very, very important. So we were helpful in the reauthorization of the federal historic tax credits, which was the basis for the redevelopment of downtown Buffalo. Now, we did the legislation providing the money. So, for example, if you have a historic building that's on the National Registry of Historic Places, Rocco Termini did a lot of great work with that. Jake Snyder did a lot of great work with that. A lot of others took advantage of it as well. You do a $10 million renovation of a historic building, it's going to cost you $6 million, because you're going to get about a 40% discount with the federal and state piece. The combination of that created a downtown Buffalo where today downtown Buffalo is the fastest growing neighborhood in Western New York, with all of these old office buildings and industrial buildings that have been converted to residential. And having residential and pedestrian density in downtown Buffalo is critical. Why? Because we're all economic actors. When we're confident, we move. When we're not, we don't. But people are spending money and supporting restaurants. So that role, Buffalo disproportionately benefited from the federal and state historic tax credit, and I was part of helping to write the reauthorization for that, which was very, very important.
You see, I think you continue to see outcomes of that legislation and developers in town utilizing that great benefit, and I think more so than any time in the 25 years that I've been back here and practicing law, Brian, I'm seeing the positive, tangible, visible impact of that redevelopment. And I think it ties into sort of your current work at Shea's, which I want to get to in just 1 minute. But before I do, incredible, track record in Congress, 19 proud years. Obviously, Brian, how difficult a decision to leave, how many competing interests, who was, saying you got to stay or don't go anywhere. We can continue to need you in that role to have this impact on our community. Walk me through sort of the 18th year and what maybe led to you just taking a step back, say maybe there's other opportunities within my community where I can make an impact.
Good question. It was the year that Kevin McCarthy, the Republicans controlled the House. Kevin McCarthy from California was the speaker. And he was eventually tossed out by his colleagues because the margins between Democrat and Republican were so close. And I was going to Washington. I'd get back on a Friday, get back on a plane on Monday. I was there all week. And we couldn't do business for 3 months because you can't do business without a speaker. Democracy's in trouble because democracy has a customer service problem. There's a $35 trillion debt. It costs you $1 trillion a year just to service the national debt. There's a $2 trillion deficit this year, federal budget, which is a $6.5 trillion budget. Social Security's future is uncertain. There was a federal student loan program where people couldn't go to college because they couldn't get their applications processed. We had 2 wars in the Middle East costing $6 trillion, losing 7,000 American soldiers. We went into Afghanistan right after 9/11 and took out the Taliban. Today, the Taliban owns Afghanistan. And I just saw a report in NPR 2 days ago where we left the United States $8 billion in weapons and vehicles in Afghanistan. So not only did we give up Afghanistan to our sworn enemy who was responsible in large part for 9/11, we left them $8 billion of American taxpayer paid weapons and armament. We're in Iraq because they were supposed to have had weapons of mass destruction. They didn't have weapons of mass destruction. And again, after nearly 20 years there and too many American soldiers killed, you know who owns Iraq today? Iran. So democracy has a customer service problem, and the federal government has. So you got 435 members of Congress, and you have gridlock. For example, you're going to see all this man-made drama covered in the national media about another government shutdown and the need to do a continuing resolution. A continuing resolution is basically a collective statement to America: we can't do our job. Congress has 2 responsibilities: make a budget and provide oversight to ensure that budget is administered consistent with the legislative intent. Can't do it. And I was one of 435, and I couldn't justify really wasting my time there. Congress is a very resilient institution. It will come back. We're just going through a very, very, very bad patch. I'm a student of government as much as I am a practitioner, and I just saw that I probably could. I'm a Democrat. I turned that into a solid Democratic district. It was kind of marginal when I first won it. I probably could have stayed for a while. You know, I have a strong work ethic, but I just thought there's got to be something better I can do to contribute to my community. And fortunately, I ended up at Shea's as the president.
I would have thought, and I imagine that you had and could have had many opportunities to think about your next role when you had made the difficult decision to leave Congress. And you mentioned Buff State at least being interested, or them and you, or you and them. And I'm curious how you began to filter those opportunities as you talked to other business leaders who said, "Hey, Brian, can you help us with this, or can you come join this initiative or that initiative?" What were you looking for? What did you think would be sort of a good setting for you to continue your work in?
Yeah, I simply wanted to come home and to contribute. And I saw in Shea's an iconic cultural institution, a place that I remember as a kid. I saw Bruce Springsteen in 1978. He kicked off the Darkness on the Edge of Town tour there, and I was in the West Box with 12 of my closest friends. Saw great shows there, and just knew that people. I'm not a theater guy. I don't have a discerning eye or ear for talent. I thought what I could bring to Shea's as an organization, as an institution, as a vision, to use Shea's as a catalyst from which to redevelop downtown Buffalo, starting in the theater district. It's bound by Washington, Pearl, West Tupper, and Chippewa. It's small, but it's manageable. So we have a very ambitious rebuilding plan. It will be about a $60 million capital campaign to remake the Shea's Theater. It's going to be 100 years old next year in 2026. We have a $15 million addition to, or attachment to Shea's, it's basically congestion mitigation to move people around the theater in the safest, most pleasant, and efficient manner. We will add 62 new restroom fixtures, 3 high-speed, large-capacity elevators, and more concessions. We're looking at 710, which we own. It used to be the old Studio Arena Theater. We will do a multi-million-dollar improvement to that space. And then the Shea Smith Theater in Phase 2, we will do a renovation of those 2 floors and then go up 4 or 5 floors to create artist lofts. We have a huge economic impact in downtown Buffalo. We just finished Lion King, Disney. Shea's doesn't make a lot of money on these shows because typically we got none of the ticket revenues. So it was $5.8 million, but the economic impact, the consumer spending of 68,000 people coming through the Shea's front door. There are 109 restaurants, taverns, and shops in and around the theater district, according to Buffalo Place. So that $19 million of consumer spending occurred after the ticket was purchased. Here's the other interesting thing to keep in mind. Our demographic is suburban, white, and older. So that means, that poses challenges relative to Shea's need, and we are working on diversification. But that money came in from outside the Buffalo area.
Sure.
So in other words, that $19 million would not have been spent in Buffalo had it not been for Shea's. So we're a catalyst, if you will. So we got a very ambitious plan. It's very exciting. We're working with local architect Steve Carmina Wood. And you're going to see display digital signage in and around the theater district, much like Times Square. That in and of itself, it's advertising, but it's also an exciting place that people like to come and gather. So we're doing these improvements to the assets that we own and occupy, but we're also going beyond the confines of our buildings to do streetscapes along Main Street at that 600 block.
That's great to hear.
So what we want to do, Dave, essentially is make the theater district a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week destination, as opposed to just a busy place when the theaters and the other entertainment venues and theaters are active.
Tell me, as you transition from politics to the public sector here and continuing to make this impact in our community, Brian, anything surprise you in terms of things that were maybe more challenging for you to accomplish or maybe easier for you to accomplish as you got out of a political setting and into sort of a public sector setting with Shea's? Were you pleasantly surprised by the ease of doing business or frustrated about inability to effectuate change that you thought should be obvious to all? Any initial impressions, say 6 months into the role, that you sort of woke up and said, "Wow, I can't believe that," positively or negatively?
Great question, and it's all positive. I haven't missed my time in Congress. I loved it there while I was there, but I haven't missed it for 1 second. The difference is at Shea's, you work hard and you see incremental progress toward a larger goal. Congress, unfortunately, and it's the gridlock in Washington generally, and a lot of good people on both Democratic and Republican side, but the progress, the opportunity to make real progress on behalf of the nation has been strictly limited because of the gridlock. Let me give you an example. 10,000 bills are introduced in Congress every year. Maybe a couple hundred get signed into law. And you have this, constant gridlock, threat of a government shutdown. Keep in mind that, the federal government is 25% of the American economy. It's $6.5 trillion. The economy generally doesn't respond well to uncertainty and instability. So when Congress screws around with a government shutdown. It's used as a threat to gain some leverage, to get some other deal that they want. That does material damage to the very place that you were elected to make better. That's twisted. That's just not healthy. The United States government, we're 5% of the world's population. We're 25% of the world's economy. The top seven, the Magnificent Seven tech companies, they have a market capitalization of $15 trillion. 10 years ago, those same seven companies had a market capitalization of $2 trillion. The market capitalization of Apple is larger than the entire market capitalization of the country of Germany. I mean, we have all of these great, great strengths, and people, want to kind of shit can America. I don't get it. Every opportunity that all of us have had, you come from one generation of people that didn't go to school. The second generation could, because we're a nation that promoted and invested in social mobility and all the things. Clinton used to have a line. He used to say that, Bill Clinton, that everything that's wrong with America can be fixed by what's right about America. And I just think that our politics right now, I'm a Democrat, the Democratic Party, the party of working families. We lost working families this past election. Something's going on where people aren't being listened to and people are very frustrated. They say, when people are very insecure about their futures, they don't turn left economically, they turn right culturally. It's called the politics of nostalgia. People want the world that they knew. And that world that they knew may not have been perfect, but so much change has occurred, technology, culture, that they're just, they're overwrought. And the Trump tagline, "Make America Great Again." That's what that plays into. I don't know that's rational, but I know that it's real. And I think what happened this past election is indicative of that.
Have you been able to use your local connections, your political connections that you developed over the time in Congress to achieve objectives for Shea's? Has that been easier or like a natural progression for you to say, I sort of know what it takes to redevelop Shea's or to raise the funds that are going to be necessary to do it because I've been there on a national scale? Or how have you found having your impact in Buffalo, in downtown Buffalo at Shea's? Has it been an easier or more challenging path for you in the first year or so of your tenure?
It's been a nice transition because, first of all, Shea's, I often say nobody owns Shea's. Shea's is not for profit. I lead a group of people. We are temporary stewards of it. We have one obligation: to return it better than how we found it. So Shea's in and of itself is a brand that people respond to because it's such a beautiful, ornate theater. And Shea's has had a history of going after public money to improve it. For example, one of my successors, twice removed, Patrick Fagan and Anthony Conti, they undertook an expansion of the Shea stage. They expanded it by 40%, which made Shea's one of the best touring venues in all of America. So when shows finish up on Broadway, it's Broadway touring, they're coming to Buffalo because of the presence of mind of those leaders and their vision. And they had to sell it on the economics. Look, we're going to have bigger shows, more money coming into downtown Buffalo. And that's what, I'm trying to replicate when we're looking at improving all of our buildings. So, yeah, there's, a consistency relative to working I signed a contract with the County of Erie for a $200,000 grant before I came over here. Signed another contract with New York State for $1.2 million. Just going after those funding sources that I'm familiar with, having done budgets. Big numbers don't scare me. It's just more zeros. So whether you're balancing your checkbook or you're trying to balance a budget at Shea's, the same principles apply. And fortunately, Shea's has had a good year, and we're investing into that which the community owns so that we, too, like the previous generations, can leave Shea's better than how we found it.
That's great. That's great. And it's such a cultural institution and treasure that it deserves that sort of TLC. And I'm curious how our entrepreneurial, our business owner listeners, we could obviously go out and we'll get season tickets or we'll do other things, but how else can the business community rally around this cultural icon, Brian, or what else can we do to support the strategy that you're employing here to keep this Shea's Buffalo alive for many, many generations to come?
Yeah, it's interesting, and our economy, our life quality is largely, as I mentioned before, how we feel about our economic future. And I think when you look at Buffalo's economic future, there's a lot of belly aching about all the problems of downtown Buffalo. We lost 30,000 workers who are no longer coming downtown to work. They're working remotely. The rapid rail transit system decimated downtown Buffalo. Yeah, all these things happen, but you've got to find a workaround. You gotta problem solve or solution find, call it what you will. And I just think that if you look at Shea's, beyond, space is magical. I see people from 8 to 88 in that space, and they're transformed. It's magical. It's beautiful, beautiful space. But it also has a role beyond being in the space and enjoying entertainment and art in theater. It has a role to be the major catalyst for the redevelopment of downtown Buffalo and the theater district. And what I'm trying to do, and I think it's a skill that is transferable, to do waterfront in Buffalo, you had to have a vision, and you had to have money, and you had to do the hard work necessary to turn that vision into something real. We all know people that talk about, change and talk about progress. Very few people own it, possess the attributes that I think are necessary to get it done. I'm going to try very, very hard to do that. And in my time at Shea's, to be a transformative leader, not only for that very important institution, but for downtown Buffalo. And, there's no competition between the neighborhoods in downtown Buffalo. This is our city, and we have to have a vibrant, exciting, safe urban core, but we also have to have, neighborhoods that thrive. I grew up in South Buffalo. I grew up in a wonderful neighborhood. I know what a great neighborhood is, and I know that we don't have all of our neighborhoods in Buffalo like that. And we need to have them because that's where the opportunity comes. I think about, like the demise of the Catholic Church, it was a big thing in South Buffalo. Now, I went to Catholic schools, went to Catholic church, but I also, on weekends, we'd have the gym, we'd play floor hockey, we'd play football, we had summer programs. I grew up in Casanova Park, a park I still run in. Those are the kinds of things that shape a young person when they have good, healthy, constructive things to do, and those are the kind of neighborhoods that we need. But in downtown Buffalo is the same way. It's got all kinds of things to offer to all kinds of people, and I just think that Shea's immediate future. When I talk about all these improvements, we don't have a 5-year timeline. We have an 18 months timeline.
Incredible, right?
So I'm assembling the money now. If people, want to contribute to the capital campaign, we're going to be selling naming rights to all of our buildings. That's the trend in theaters throughout the country and actually throughout the world. And they're very, very popular. So we'll be, formally announcing the capital campaign within the next couple of weeks. You'll see what all the component parts of it are. And people will see, naming right opportunities. A business or individuals can buy anything from or purchase naming rights for the whole building or the theater to the bar and the lobby and those things, things like that. So I think it's just a very, very exciting future, and people should be excited about it. Michael Shea was born to Irish immigrants in 1859 in St. Catharines, Ontario. He moved to the First Ward of Buffalo, and he was a dock worker, he was an iron worker, and he owned a saloon on Elk Street and introduced, for the first time in Buffalo, the whole concept of singing waiters and waitresses. And he had a very Olmstedian view of theater. It was first vaudeville. He owned and operated 14 theaters, including 2 in Toronto. But like the Shea's Seneca and the North Park Theater in the Delaware District and the Riviera Theater in the Tonawondas, he built theaters so that the working folks would have access to them, that it included everybody. And then his opus was the Shea's, or the Shea's Theater. I call it the Michael Shea Theater. He called it the Wonder Theater, but that was his opus. And it was built for $1.9 million. It'd be about $37 million in today's dollars. And it was built in a year, in a day. And coming from bricklayers, most of that building is brick, and those bricks were individually laid by bricklayers. So he was a jobs producer too. When he died, 2,000 people were at his funeral at St. Joseph's Cathedral. He lived, as I said, in the First Ward on Catherine Street and Louisiana Street. And he died at the Westbrook Hotel, which is still there, at Delaware and Allen Street. Or Delaware North. It's right there. Yeah.
That's a story I'd never heard, Brian, and that's a great story about Michael Shea, and I think sort of completes the the journey that you're on when it comes to the start to Michael Shea's or Shea's Buffalo, and sort of your vision for where it's going to end up. And so I so appreciate you spending time with me today. Before I let you go, I know you're a family man. I know your Buffalo roots, what you're doing to make such a tremendous impact on the community through your political work and now your work at Shea's. But there must be, and I know you run in Cazenovia Park now, so I'll come find you and run a lap with you one day, not when it's this cold, but someday. But anything, and tell our listeners something else about Brian Higgins that maybe the average person wouldn't know about you.
For a politician, most people just assume that you're an extrovert. I'm pretty shy, to be truthful. I know although I didn't. We talked a little bit earlier, but I'm a grateful and humble student of the world and world history and world politics, and serving in Congress, serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee as I did for a while. It was a great, great gift. And I used to say nobody got more of those trips than I did. I probably visited close to 100 countries, some very tough places at tough times, Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and come away with a great memory. And I'll write a book at some point of notes that I kept in preparation for, but also while I was there, and then afterthoughts. I've been very, very fortunate. I have a beautiful family that presented me with opportunities that most people wouldn't, and just to be grateful to the previous generation that informs and inspires your contributions to the next. And I think that, I think when you look at Shea's and the opportunity that I've been given by this community, because as I said, Dave, before, this Shea's belongs to the community. And I have to make it better, and we're going to make it better.
Well, I really appreciate your humility, how humble you are, and how much of an impact that you continue to have on our community. We look for great things from you and from Shea's, and I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, how can I help? Because I know the importance of that cultural icon, and look for really positive things coming down the pike from you, Brian, and from Shea's in the months and years to come. So thanks again for being with me here today.
Happy to be with you, Dave.
Have
this
a great
fun.
rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
All right, great job, my friend. That was awesome. I could have stayed here all day, actually. That was one of the easier ones. I felt like I didn't have to do anything.
I know. I was, yeah.
That was perfect.
Don't shut up.
What do you think?